This is a brief record of an ecosystem in the early part of the 21st century. A collection of interwoven narratives from a wilderness on the edge, perhaps even a future memory. For now though, this is the story of a cloud forest in southern Mexico. This is El Triunfo.
El Triunfo is a biosphere reserve.
8 years ago I came to El Triunfo for the first time and I got fascinated by this place.
The cloud forest is the most endangered ecosystem, I think, in the world, because there remain just few patches, just few islands.
The El Triunfo Biosphere Reserve contains various ecosystems. The most important, and the one we look after the most, is the cloud forest. But surrounding this forest are pine forests, pine oak forests, combinations of pine oak and liquid
pine, and then you have the liquid amber, and finally you arrive to the cloud forest. And this like open a door to another universe, to another world.
El Triunfo is a misty, it's a beautiful, cold place. It's dark, it's full of tree ferns. It's like if you were suddenly jumping 40 million back in time and you were back in the Cenozoic. And suddenly you see this pavon that crawls up the branch, and with the horn and the weird sounds, the noises, the vocalizations they make are really special. It's like a dinosaur.
The pavon, the horned one, is funny. It's a funny bird. For this big eye with a white
monophyletic, yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about that? Is that common in birds?
It's not that common, so they're quite evolutionarily distinct, which makes them even more important as a species to save. It means that they're the sole remaining species in a particular family, and that they've diverged from the other species within its group quite a long time ago. I think it's 20 to 60 million years ago. But mainly their main role in the ecosystem is as seed dispersers, so they disperse all the fruit, the seeds of the fruit that they eat, either through defecation or through regurgitation of the seed. And so they can impact the abundance and the species that you see in cloud forests. So they're essential for the ecosystems to function.
The quest to find this mythical unicorn bird by a local naturalist in the 60s would set off a chain of events that eventually led to the creation of the reserve to safeguard this unique ecosystem.
The cloud forest that we have in Mesoamerica has remained isolated for a long time, and is a completely different of the vegetation that you have a different altitude.
These aren't trees like the pine with its needle-like leaves, nor the very broad leaves we'd expect in a jungle. Here we find medium-sized leaves, which is why the cloud forests are also known as mesophytic forests, for their average-sized leaves. Inside this forest, you could say, there are other ecosystems. On each tree you'll find many plants living together with it, like the bromeliads you can see here.
As bromeliads have no roots in the ground, they must collect their own water. These water wells serve to expand the possible habitat for amphibians far beyond the borders of streams and ponds, way up into the trees.
Dendrotriton holocalcae. It's a salamander only found in this reserve. It only lives in bromeliads. It's small and delicate, with big legs. Amphibians are important as they can tell you about pollution levels of their habitat, what changes the habitat is going through, whether temperatures are rising or falling. Essentially, they tell you about the health of an ecosystem. They're very good indicators.
With ecosystem diversity comes species diversity, and it's a change that sustains itself. So this ecosystem is a working ecosystem.
So there's a rich biodiversity for such a small area.
It's a paradise for observe birds that no other place you can observe. I like very much the quetzal. The quetzal is something magic because you can see a quetzal like almost yellow, and then green, and then blue, emerald blue.
The colours that look iridescent are generally called structural colours, and they are not because of pigments, which is generally what we associate with colour, but they're because of the structure of the feather. And so the feathers have this microscopic structure which is quite layered, and so it refracts the light when it hits it. It looks different colours depending on how you look at it or which angle you look at it from. But if you actually changed the structure or mashed up the feather, for example, you would just see grey. You wouldn't see the iridescent colour that you actually see on the bird.
Remember, quetzal feather was in pre-Hispanic time more important and more valued than gold. If somebody killed a quetzal, he was a death penalty. So the quetzal was very, very important. And this thing always intrigued me. And when you have the privilege to observe in the wild the quetzal, you understand why it was so important in pre-Hispanic times.
It really doesn't matter how good you are with your cameras. If the quetzal is in frame, especially the male, it's just mind-blowing. That shiny iridescent green that they have. And you would be surprised to see this bird that is like resplendent, it's a jewel, it's green. Well, you cannot see them when they are inside the forest. Sometimes you get like a glimpse of a tail and that's how you tell it. You really have to have good eyes.
To track down this elusive bird in the densely packed forest, we relied heavily on our guide, Jacinto.
Está comunicando.
This surreal exchange between man and bird went on for several minutes. Jacinto grew up in El Triunfo before it was turned into a reserve. His family was one of 8 that made a living off the forest, and after they were evicted from this land, many found jobs as park rangers, guides and other support roles that now ensure the protection of this threatened wilderness.
The thing I like most about my job is protecting all that the reserve has to offer and working with the local community to help them understand why we need the reserve. Many people think the reserve is just for the government, but it's not like that. The reserve is for everyone. The reserve is very important for many wonderful things like the air we breathe, which is clean and pure thanks to the action of the trees. Also, the abundant rain, which feeds streams that bring fresh water to the communities.
El Triunfo is situated on the Sierra Madre de Chiapas, a small mountain range which runs parallel to the Pacific coast. So here winds loaded with water vapor from the sea collide with this range, and as they rise up the steep mountains, condense. On the other side we have the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, which also sends winds loaded with humidity. Though these tend to precipitate on other parts of the Chiapas state, they too eventually reach here. So in this region, this humidity is concentrated. It rains a lot, and when it's not raining, there's often fine water droplets suspended in the air, or mist hanging in trees.
La neblina que constantemente está entre los árboles.
By all accounts, it rains a lot in El Triunfo. Some say as many as 300 days a year. Other stats show that the region receives 10% of all of Mexico's rainfall. The rain, filtered and purified by the trees, feeds rivers on both sides of the Sierra Madre, providing fresh waters for agriculture, aquaculture and hydroelectric needs, as well as human consumption. On top of that, the thick forest provides protection against landslides in this very wet region.
So economically, it's very important to protect El Triunfo.
Nevertheless, it seems there are those that seek other ways to profit from these mountains.
Yes, there are mineral concessions inside El Triunfo.
What?
You want to record it?
Yeah.
¿Quieres contarnos tantito sobre eso y el proyecto de la carretera que ya está trazado?
Juan Carlos goes on to explain the mineral concessions already existing in El Triunfo and the surrounding areas, as well as plans for a highway which would cut right across the reserve, both of which would be a disaster for this fragile ecosystem. In Juan Carlos's eyes, though, the cloud forest faces an even bigger threat.
The full effects of global climate change are yet to be determined. We're already suffering the first effects of climate change with the increase in frequency and severity of tropical cyclones. These tropical storms have a devastating effect on the forests, the rivers and the community. Also, the pressure for land is more heavily felt. There's no more land to distribute in the Chiapas state, where the human population is already very large and needs more space for growing crops. On top of this, the current changes in temperature and precipitations from climate change mean that crops, which used to be grown at lower altitudes, can now be grown on higher ground. And the places that are not currently cultivated are the forests of the El Triunfo Reserve. So this is a very real threat. In recent years, scientists, especially ornithologists, have noticed changes in the phonology of the plants and trees. That is, changes in the start or end of the dry and wet seasons, impacting the appearance of flowers and fruits, which in turn affect the behavior of the birds and the start of their breeding season.
When I came in, I found a very different El Triunfo of what I knew. The first week in El Triunfo was dusty, it was full of bugs, it was very warm, the rains hadn't really started, and I kind of feel that it's rain that triggers the whole breeding seasons for some of the species that I wanted to particularly focus on. But I found a couple of horned ones that were already like romantic, to say it some way. They were behaving like a future couple. So every day, for the first 2 weeks, I would hike 3 kilometers up with all the equipment and create a mini base camp in a place where I was kind of hidden, and I would see a fantastic scenario with great trees and beautiful vegetation where these couple of horned ones were developing their activities. And yeah, I could see the male mooing, like this beautiful song they do from their perch early in the morning, around 9 o'clock, sharp as a clock. They would start very beautiful. And then the female would show up, she would start feeding, and then they would more and more would start to have these intimate behaviors. And I really wanted to get some shots that would tell the story of what it is, the love story of the horned one.
One of the things that certainly improved are bird numbers, especially the horned guan. That's something there's definitely more of than when we were living here.
So this is a change that I have observed in my lifetime. And this is very stimulating, very optimistic sign to see how things can change in just a few decades. And so it's possible to make conservation, it's possible to change the relationship between human and wildlife. This is something very positive.
How do I say this? I always have second thoughts about if what I do attracts too many people to the protected areas. I have seen ecotourism going wrong and I have fears. But I do believe in a culture of appreciation of nature, in a culture of naturalists. And I think that's, if you have beautiful publications, beautiful shows that inspire, that make the people feel proud about the country that we have, then that would be a fantastic outcome.
Well, I think that right now there are so many people interested in El Triunfo that if something change, that we have a response from the society trying to preserve them, try to make something para que se mantenga el triunfo, para que siga adelante. It's a so magnificent place, it's a so splendid place that is impossible for myself in my mind to think that tomorrow no existe más.
The future of El Triunfo, like so many other ecosystems around the world, is on a knife edge. Whether future generations ever have the chance to walk up that little trail, past the pines and the liquid ambers, to this forest in the sky, now rests squarely in our hands.